All right, looks like we are live on YouTube. Hi, everybody. I am also going to go live here on Instagram in a moment. We will be reading aloud tonight from the selection of my Mind Body Book Club for April, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This is a fiction book. We read both fiction and nonfiction in the Mind Body Book Club. And we like to select titles that center around habit and identity evolution, self empowerment, traditions, self healing, wisdom, and all kinds of wonderful, inspiring topics. And so this was our topic for next month. And I thought I'd try something new on the online community here and create a new kind of way to connect. If you can't come to the live Mind Body Book Club meets, we meet every 6 weeks on Monday nights downtown in Colorado Springs. And if you aren't able to join us then, I certainly hope that you are able to use some of the virtual features that I'm starting to tap into, these live read alouds, as well as some content on the Rosina mobile application. So if you didn't know, I now have a mobile app, both for iPhone and Android devices that offer a bunch of free resources on the basics of Ayurveda and some of the ways in which it can help you and ways that I might be able to help you. So be sure to check that out. And we're going to begin reading. I selected a passage today from chapter 5 called Family Values. Again, we're reading from the Mind Body Book Club selection for April, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. I'm going to read for about maybe 10 to 15 minutes and then just posit some questions and thoughts around the theme from that passage. So add your comments below, and I hope you will join us in real time. So, Chapter 5, page 32. Family Values. Her lab mates assume Elizabeth was dating Calvin Evans for one reason only: his fame. With Calvin in her back pocket, she was untouchable. But the reason was much simpler. Because I love him, she would have said if someone asked, but no one asked. It was the same for him. Had anyone asked him, Calvin would have said, Elizabeth Zott was what he treasured most in the world, and not and not because she was pretty, and not because she was smart, but because she loved him and he loved her with a certain kind of fullness, of conviction, of faith that underscored their devotion to each other. They were more than friends, more than confidants, more than allies, and more than lovers. If relationships are a puzzle, then theirs was solved from the get-go, as if someone shook out the box and watched from above as each separate piece landed exactly right, slipping one into the other, fully interlocked, into a picture that made perfect sense. They made other couples sick. At night, after they made love, they would always lie in the same position on their backs, his legs slung over hers, her arm atop his thigh, his head tipped down toward hers, and they would talk. Sometimes about their challenges, other times about their future, always about their work. Despite their post-coital fatigue, their conversations often lasted long into the early morning hours. And whenever it was about a certain finding or formula, eventually, invariably, one of them would have to get up and take a few notes. That's so me. While some couples' togetherness tends to affect their work in a negative way, it was just the opposite for Elizabeth and Calvin. They were working even when they weren't working, fueling each other's creativity and inventiveness with a new point of view. And while the scientific community would later marvel at their productivity, they probably would have marveled even more had they realized most of it was done naked. Still awake? Calvin whispered hesitantly one night as they lay in bed. Because I want to run something by you. It's about Thanksgiving. What about it? Well, it's coming up, and I wondered if you were going home, and if you were going to invite me to tag along. And he paused, then rushed ahead. Meet your family. What? Elizabeth whispered back. Home? No, I'm not going home. I thought we might have Thanksgiving here, together. Unless, well, were you planning on going home? Absolutely not, he said. In the past few months, Calvin and Elizabeth had talked about almost everything: books, careers, beliefs, aspirations, movies, politics, even allergies. There was only one obvious exception: family. It wasn't intentional, not at first anyway, but after months of never bringing it up, it became clear it might never come up. It's not to say they were incurious of each other's roots. Who didn't want to dip into the deep end of someone else's childhood and meet all of the usual suspects? The strict parent, the competitive siblings, the crazy aunt. Not them. Thus, the topic of family was like a cordoned off room on a historic home tour. One could still tip a head in to get a vague sense that Calvin had grown up somewhere. Massachusetts? And that Elizabeth had brothers, or was it sisters? But there was no opportunity to step inside and sneak a peek at the medicine cabinet until Calvin brought up Thanksgiving. I can't believe I'm asking this, he finally ventured in the thick silence. But I realize I don't know where you're from. Oh, Elizabeth said. Well, Oregon, mostly. You? Iowa. Really? She asked. I thought you were from Boston. No, he said quickly. Any brothers? Sisters? A brother, she said. You? None. His voice was flat. She lay very still, taking in his tone. Was it lonely? She asked. Yes, he said bluntly. I'm sorry, she said, taking his hand under the sheets. Your parents didn't want another child? Hard to say, his voice ready. It's not really the kind of thing a kid asks a parent, is it? But probably. Certainly. But then, they died when I was 5. My mother was 8 months pregnant at the time. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Calvin, Elizabeth said, bolting upright. What happened? Train, he said matter-of-factly. Hit them. Calvin, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It's okay, he said. It was a long time ago. I don't really remember them. But, your turn, he said abruptly. No, wait, Calvin. Who raised you? My aunt, but then she died too. What? How? We were in the car and she had a heart attack. The car jumped the curb and slammed into a tree. God. Call it a family tradition, dying in accidents. That's not funny. I wasn't trying to be funny. How old were you, Elizabeth pressed. 6. She squeezed her eyes shut. And then you were put in her voice trailed off, a Catholic boys' home. And, she prompted him, hating herself for doing it. What was that like? He paused as if trying to find an honest answer to this obscenely simple question. Rough, he said, his voice so low she barely heard him. A quarter mile away, a train whistled and Elizabeth cringed. How many nights had Calvin lain here and heard that whistle and thought about his dead parents and his almost sibling and never said a word? Unless perhaps he never thought about them. He said he could barely remember them. But then who did he remember? And what had they been like? And when he'd said rough, what did that mean exactly? She wanted to ask, but his tone, so dark and low and strange, warned her to go no further. And what about his later life? How did he ever learn to row in the middle of Iowa, much less make his way to Cambridge to row there? And college? Who paid for it? And his earlier education? A boys' home in Iowa didn't sound like it provided much in the way of learning. It's one thing to be brilliant, but to be brilliant without opportunity, that was something else. If Mozart had been born to a poor family in Bombay instead of a cultured one in Salzburg, would he have composed Symphony No. 36 in C? Not a chance. How, then, had Calvin come from nothing to become one of the most highly respected scientists in the world? You were saying, he said, his voice wooden as he pulled her back down next to him. Oregon. Yes, she said, dreading the telling of her own story. How often do you visit? He asked. Never. But why? Calvin almost shouted. shocked that she could have thrown away a perfectly good family, one that was still alive anyway. Religious reasons. Calvin paused as if he might have missed something. My father was a type of religious expert, she explained. A what? A sort of God salesman. I'm not following. Someone who preaches gloom and doom to make money? You know, she said, her voice filling with embarrassment. The kind who rants about how the end is near but has a solution, say a specialized baptism or a pricey amulet that will keep Judgment Day off just a bit longer. There's a living in that? She turned her head toward his. Oh, yes. He lay silent, trying to imagine it. Anyway, she said, we had to move a lot because of it. You can't keep telling everyone the end is near if the end never comes. What about your mother? She made the amulets. No, I mean, was she also very religious? Elizabeth hesitated. Only if you count greed as a religion. There's lots of competition in this area, Calvin. It's extremely lucrative. But my father was especially gifted, and the new Cadillac he got every year proved it. But when it comes down to it, I think my father's talent for spontaneous combustion really made him stand out. Wait, what? It's really hard to ignore someone who shouts, give me a sign, and then something bursts into a flame. Wait, are you saying, Calvin, she said, reverting to her standard scientific tone, did you know pistachios are naturally flammable? It's because of their high fat content. Normally, pistachios are stored under fairly rigid conditions of humidity, temperature, and pressure. But those conditions be altered, the pistachio's fat-cleaving enzymes produce free fatty acids that are broken down when the seed takes in oxygen and shreds carbon dioxide. Result? Fire. I will credit my father with two things. He could conjugate a spontaneous combustion whenever he needed a convenient sign from God. She shook her head. Boy, did we go through the pistachios. Ending on page 37. Again, that was an excerpt from chapter 5 of Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And I really appreciated this scene of this couple talking about their family histories. And later on in the conversation in the chapter, the question is posed of, kind of what you do with the family you're born into and how much of an influence, or dare I say, excuse, my word, not the author's words, could that be for your success or your ability to produce the kind of thriving life that you want. So those were my initial thoughts, and how different traditions honor their ancestors and how that can help with healing when we have these ancient natural methods of healing and indigenous wisdom talking about what we now know as epigenetics and the effects of generational trauma and generational victories and stories, and how chronic disease can sometimes be embedded in our genes from generations past, yet it remains in our daily lifestyles and our beliefs and our thoughts and our relationships with the people in our lives, I think, and the people in the world around us, just in general, that help us stay emotionally and mentally fit and allow us to heal and not necessarily experience a genetic disease just because so-and-so in your family may have had it, or we've had generations of family with a certain health history. I always like to say that the genes may load the gun, but lifestyle will pull the trigger. And how we can learn from the stories of our ancestors past and, again, just bring about healing, or acknowledgement of those persons' sacrifices for your family or for your thrive, and to encourage through ritual and ceremony continued conversation with ancestors and family. And I thought all of these things came to me as I read through that chapter of this book. And you'll see as you join book club or you read the book, the conversation then evolves further into more questions around the impact our blood family has and what really defines family, whether that is blood or the people that we choose and choose repeatedly over and over to be in our lives. So, those were some of my thoughts, and I just wanted to sample this out, see if people were interested in engaging with me in this way, and maybe schedule some regular intervaled read alouds of our selected title in our book club. Again, that's Mind Body Book Club. We meet on Monday nights in downtown Colorado Springs every 6 weeks. And we'll be meeting next on April 14th at 7 p.m. I always have coffee, tea. I usually bake a little nice Ayurveda treat, and people bring potluck snacks to share. And we sit around the fireplace and talk about the title along with the different themes in the title and what we think about it, both in the book and in the characters of our own lives. So reach out if you want to be a part of my community. Book club is just one of the many communities and clubs that I'd like to lead and organize. And I'd like to bring people together, have fun, have some elevated conversation, have some inspired company that keeps us thriving, keeps us growing and asking the right questions about ourselves and the world around us, and staying integrated with each other and healing each other together. That's what I'm all about. So I hope to see you again, and I hope you all have a good night. Sleep well, my friends.